Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from a rainy Macomb, Illinois. And I have swum into the office this morning we're going to be having a great show today. We're going to be talking with horticulture educator Sarah Vogel about trees, some of those troubles with trees that we might encounter in our home yards and landscapes. But before we get to Sarah, we have to introduce our co-hosts with us every single week. We are joined by Katie Parker, local foods educator in Adams County. Hey, Katie.
Chris, how are things going for you?
Well, I got the canoe moored out front, just waiting for the next round of rain to start here in Macomb. How are you?
Pretty good. Are you starting to gather the animals?
Yes, I am. The animals, they're coming 2 by 2 to my doorstep.
Right.
I say I have a window on my front porch that my kids leave open, and literally there are cats coming into my house right now. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That
mostly our
like,
cats, not always though.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sounds like a party.
Swing by, drop off your cat. It's got a place.
We can put a sign out front.
Someone who I know also loves cats is horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville, Illinois. Hey, Ken.
Hello. Love may be a little bit of a strong word.
I know you have a ghost
my
cat.
Feelings on cats. We do have a cat, but I'm more of a dog person than a cat person.
And you've explained in previous times that your cat hides from everybody, right? It just stays away from the dog.
Yeah, she's still angry at us for getting a dog a year later.
Yeah. That's cats for you, though. Yeah. Well, Ken, Katie, I know we've talked about trees before on the podcast, and I know that we've all have a vested interest, having trees in our yards. We have a special guest with us today, horticulture educator Sarah Vogel, to talk with us about trees. So let's welcome Sarah onto the show. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much, Chris and Katie and Ken, for having me on.
Oh, we are happy to have you here. Now, Sarah, you've been with Extension for, help me out here, has it been a year now?
It has. I passed my year mark in March. So it was a strange year to start a new position. But I'm glad to say that Good Growing actually was a really good way to help me get to know my coworkers and their voices and personalities. So I do thank you for that.
Well, that's why we're here, to entertain and educate. Hopefully, that we're hopefully entertaining and educating. So you never know. But it looks like you are back in your office. Is this your office where you're located in Decatur? Is that correct?
Yep. I'm in Decatur. I'm in our unit. The unit that I oversee, I guess you could say, is a tri-county unit. So I'm in Macon County in Decatur, and I also cover Piatt and DeWitt counties. And yes, I'm in the office today because the kids would have been really loud for an interview at home.
Hey,
I think you all understand.
We get it. We get it. Early on, there was a lot of editing out screams and yells and hoops and hollers.
Cat meows.
Cat meows, dog barks. Oh my goodness. But then I think after a while, we just started embracing the screaming and yelling. So.
Yeah, because we're not the only ones doing it. Everybody got to experience that. Exactly.
Yes. So Sarah, kind of one of the other parts of our job, I mean, yes, as educators, we talk about horticulture. We help to spread that knowledge out into our communities. But part of it is also helping to oversee some of our local volunteer programs, the Master Gardeners and Master Naturalists. Now, I'm not as familiar in your Tri-County area. Do you have Master Gardeners and Master Naturalists where you're at?
We do have both programs going on. I oversee the Master Gardeners, and the Master Naturalists are actually under another educator.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that worked out, but that's the way it works in our unit, in our Tri-County area. And the Master Naturalists that we have are really involved. They really care. They are self-motivated, self-sustaining for the most part, which is great. Mm-hmm. And just really try to make their presence known in the community, so they're appreciated.
Definitely. And so one of the aspects of with volunteerism is making sure that we're training, we're educating them as well, so that they can continue to extend that knowledge out into our communities. So, Sarah, do you know, are there any training opportunities coming up in your neck of the woods for volunteers?
Yes, so our Tri-County area we will have offered 5 opportunities to go through the Master Gardener Core training in 2021. We've already had the hybrid Master Gardener training. We have an online training to start in June, and then some other online opportunities, and then our in-person training in fall.
So, and I think that hybrid training has been real successful. I know a lot of volunteers that have gone through that really enjoyed that hybrid, kind of that flipped classroom approach of learning at home. Well, I mean, we're all learning at home, but that learning at home approach, and then joining for a little while once a week, just to ask questions and kind of hash out kind of different activities. So
We had some good feedback being
Mhm.
able to offer, virtual opportunities like that. We actually had some Master Gardeners go through, our in-person training, Master Gardener training last fall was of course virtual. But that actually allowed for some people to join where they may not have otherwise been able to. So I think accessibility was important there too.
Definitely. Yeah. I think we've reached a lot more people through that hybrid style training. So in terms of the community projects that Master Gardeners do in your neck of the woods, what would you say this year are you most excited about? I guess is that really hard to say? Are we picking favorites like kids? Maybe we can't do this. Maybe that's a
No.
bad question to ask. I hope I don't get anyone in trouble.
No, I don't. I think we all have our kind of pet projects in any
Mhm.
position, anywhere we go. So I don't think that's unfair to ask. Something I'm really excited about is our partnership with a local healthcare facility. They serve a really great need in our community. Their clientele is comprised of a lot of low resource populations, and they have started what they're calling a prescription produce program, where their clients receive vouchers for fresh produce and then come to their on-site gardens and farms and orchard even. It's an amazing program. We have our Master Gardener volunteers that will go and help there. Their farm manager has gone through the Master Gardener training. And I just really look forward to that partnership continuing because I think it's needed and well received in the community.
That sounds amazing. That's like a really good way to get that interaction going between the producer and the consumer there. And we do have
It's
some.
great to have something like that, where we're already kind of investing our
Mhm.
volunteer force. Then, I can go out there and help provide, and Master Gardeners provide technical assistance. They have in their orchard, I've done like a fruit tree pruning workshop that was pretty well attended, I think, given the circumstances of
Yeah.
this last year, of course. But we also, it's an amazing opportunity, a partnership that we have there. So I'm really going to coddle that one and make sure we keep that one going.
I think that sounds like a pretty neat program. So I would be interested also in learning more about it as
Sure.
the time goes through. Yeah, so that would be good to know. There is another program that you have going on. It's a virtual help desk. You call it Anything Grows. Tell us a bit about that.
That's right. So we started the first round of Anything Grows last year, and it was sort of in response to all the onslaught of new gardeners that everybody saw. Oftentimes people bite off a little more than they can chew, but everybody had so much time, to do these things last year. And once they realized that they may be facing some challenges, and our regular Master Gardener help desk wasn't in session, of course. So another educator and myself kind of formed a virtual help desk that we called Anything Grows. And this is the second round of it. So every Friday from noon to 1 until June 25th, I think has been a 10-week series, if I'm not mistaken. You have to pre-register. So we know you're coming. We know who we got
Mhm.
here, but you can get on and just ask questions. It's a pretty informal atmosphere. We have kind of some topics. We started with what's in bloom right now in the spring. We've talked about vegetable gardens. We'll talk about composting. So we have a topic that we'll talk about, but also we like to just hear about what's going on in everybody else's yards, or maybe some problems that you're encountering, or maybe you have a tree problem and it's on vegetable day. That's fine too, because anything grows. Everybody learns something.
I like that. Okay, well, there's lots happening out of your Decatur office there. We will put a link to your website, your unit website, to Anything Grows, and to be able to reach out to you more specifically if people are listening to this and they have questions about what we've been discussing, whether it's volunteerism or asking questions.
That sounds great. Another opportunity that I would really like to talk about that may be helpful for other educators or people involved in other volunteer programs is something that we've been really looking at, purposeful volunteer recruitment, I guess you could say, and trying to reach diverse audiences. I'm the newbie here, so you all have probably heard it a squillion more times than I have, but, extension is this quote unquote hidden gem. And, we have this great Master Gardener program, but we're not reaching everybody that we could. So to bring it to people, to more underserved audiences, I guess you could say, which has kind of been both my personal and professional agenda for some time, is reaching those underserved audiences. We're trying to reach out and find the person that doesn't know where their food comes from before the grocery store, and get them into some, if not the Master Gardener training program, then maybe just some of our events as a participant. I'm sure you aren't amazed, but some of your listeners or viewers may be amazed that many people do not know where their food comes from before the grocery store, or that this tomato came from a plant that was grown from a seed. And so for me, call it naive, but I really believe that education fosters appreciation for things. And the more somebody can learn about something, the better we take care of it. Whether that is public parks or their vegetable garden or the trees in their yard. I think that many Master Gardeners would probably say the same, which is why they're involved in the program. So asking, I guess, amongst my team here, my local team here, those tough questions, does our volunteer force represent what our communities look like? If they do, great. If they don't, can we change that? Or how do we change that? Why the presence of Master Gardeners or myself in the community helps, but why aren't we reaching certain audiences? So we've looked at reasons people don't volunteer or participate in these events. And there could be all kinds of different reasons, anything from transportation, which again, our virtual opportunities help a lot, to cost barriers. Here in our Tri-County area, we offer a partial fee waiver for Master Gardener training, which was in place before I came here, so I'm not going to try and take credit for that. Sometimes the hours of our events, those who work regular 9-to-5 jobs may not be able to come at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. So making things more accessible. And sometimes it's things like language barriers that, for instance, I'd love to see our Master Gardener program offered in other languages. I think that could really reach a lot of people, or even just starting with specific brochures or handouts, or maybe multilingual social media posts. I think these are all really great ways to provide accessibility. So once we started talking about that, then we're like, okay, well, how do we go about this? And so using the tools and data and things at our disposal, we tried to target audiences, and you can do that in lots of different ways. You can make a map of all the Master Gardener addresses that are currently enrolled internally. Of course, we've never shared that information, of course, and have all these dots on the map, and then aim for the place where the dots aren't. You can use things like the U.S. Census Bureau and targeted mailing through USPS to look at different, your target audiences. And then again, try and make a presence in those target areas. And I think our big thing is we want to make sure that we are intentionally including people, not just casting the same net that we've always used and hoping we get some diversity. I think intentional inclusion is really key in a lot of extensions efforts.
Let's
I told
sounds
you
like-
once you got me talking.
Hey, no, so you're asking a lot of the same. I mean, like you said, a squintillion times we've been asking ourselves these questions, or we've been hearing the idea that we're Illinois' best kept secret, which I don't think marketing's going to let us say anymore. They're like, stop it, stop saying that. But the question of accessing underserved audiences, holy cow, we've been asking that, but it sounds like you're making like measurable progress on that. So I mean that's why we love having new educators on, because you can figure out these problems that we've just been banging our heads against the wall.
Well, I think it takes all of us though, right? It takes a new idea from over here and a little bit from over here. And hey, I've got this tool back here, and that's how we make progress. It's not just my idea. Trust me, it's a whole team of people kind of putting our heads together. But I think the most important thing again is how can we reach everybody? How can we include everybody in this?
Oh yeah, no, completely 100% agree. I think, yeah, I think that is a great discussion. You should be on the annual conference. So Extension, we have an annual conference every year. I think that sounds like a good topic for that.
I think somebody's already tried to recruit me, but nice try.
Nice try. Ken, Katie,
Wasn't me.
one of you? No?
We know who we can pass your name along to, though.
Oh, yes. Sarah, in addition to, everything we've been talking about, your background also stems quite heavily in tree care, arboriculture, forestry. So we do have some questions. These are actual questions that come into the extension offices, which, they're the basis for what we'll be talking about here. Wondering, would you mind helping us go through this kind of these myriad of tree topics?
I would not mind at all. It is one of my most very favorite topics to talk on. And the questions that come in are always fascinating. So please, by all means.
Great learning experience for us too as educators is working through these questions. So Katie, would you mind kicking us off this week on to our troublesome tree questions?
Absolutely. So as our trees are leafing out, I've been getting a lot of questions from homeowners as to why is my tree not leafing out, or why is my tree not full? So what are some of the biggest problems that you see when it comes to trees in the home landscape?
So I think that could probably be addressed in a few different ways. When it comes down to somebody's specific tree, of course, you all know that we're going to ask for lots of different pictures for diagnosis if we aren't able to visit the site. And there are certain things that we know we see every year, like anthracnose and things that affect certain species like Rhizosphaera and different things. So there's kind of timely topics that come along with that. And which that's, again, why Extension is here, right? So we can push out that information at the right time and maybe help somebody turn on the light bulb that like, oh, I saw my tree do this last year. Maybe it's just an annual thing. For homeowners, clients, or whatever, not everybody owns a home, so I hate to say homeowners. But in yards, trees in the urban environment get the short end of the stick, no pun intended. And when I say urban trees, I don't necessarily just mean downtown city streets. This is, neighborhoods, suburbs, anywhere where there are both trees and humans in existence together. Trees often suffer because they don't, maybe it wasn't the right plant for the right site. They're put in conditions that aren't necessarily suitable to that species. They may get improperly pruned over time, which can lead to a lot of different problems, invitation of different pests and pathogens. They could have been improperly planted or had just constant human activity around them, mowing around there, maybe the mower deck takes a little bit of bark off every time, or just the compaction of soil from mowers or our own feet. Construction that we do making a new driveway or sidewalk, things like that. So it's not always those biotic pests, and it's not always a disease or an insect. Sometimes we're the pests, and we're putting these trees in environmental conditions where they experience, different stressors. So as you mentioned, we get a lot of technical assistance requests. And I think the tree question, what's wrong with my tree? What's going on here, is probably one of the most frequent, at least here. So again, the abiotic disorders, those environmental stressors and things like that, I think that those are every bit as prevalent, if not more so, than our actual biotic disorders, with some exceptions. So, for instance, emerald ash borer, that many of us have heard of, that is a pest that affects ash trees. It is definitely the cause of destruction and decimation of that species. However, even in saying that, emerald ash borer will typically pick off the sickly ones first. They'll come after those trees that are already stressed. And then it's good for homeowners to know too, that it's rarely one thing that affects a tree. We get a call when somebody's experiencing symptoms of something, or they see an infestation of insects or whatever, which are generally not, they're generally a symptom and not the cause, generally speaking. So trees rarely suffer and die from only one thing. They have these whole range or host of environmental conditions that will compound and eventually lead to tree failure, a slow death over time.
Many nails in the coffin there.
That's right. That's right. And, sometimes we're forced to tell people things that they don't want to hear. I think people often look for that kind of magic pill, the magic, what can I spray on this to make it better? And then sometimes the answer is, well, nothing. There's no control for that. I'm sorry, your tree's going to die. Sometimes it's, yes, you can save it, but you have to do these 4 things at these certain times a year, which is also, some people will do it, some people won't. And when talking with clients, I often try to take a positive approach to it, instead of saying, well, you picked the wrong species and you put it in the wrong spot and you've pruned it improperly. That, doesn't make anybody feel good to be accused, so I'll say things like, well, we encourage proper practices. We see problems with blue spruce because they aren't suited to our soils very well. And these are the things we see. Or we recommend, leaving lower branches on evergreens because it'll compromise the structural integrity. Or, well, some of us like dandelions and clover and violets in our grass because it, helps pollinators that encourage the food we eat. So I try to, I know it's passive aggressive, so I already know.
Perfect job for all of us.
Yeah. I think that often with trees in your yard, people just don't know what they're in for. We all want the benefits of trees, like you mentioned, the shade, the recreation, wildlife habitat, whatever the case may be. And some people they just don't know. They just don't know. And that's exactly where extension comes in.
Right. So like you mentioned, a lot of times we're our own worst enemies when it comes to growing trees. And I think one of the more common issues that I've seen is tree planting. A lot of issues with that. So, and there's a lot of conflicting advice online about kind of the best way to do it, what you should and shouldn't do. So what is the best way to go about planting a tree? Right. So right plant for the right site. That's kind of our mantra, right? We want to pick a species. And, I'm as a horticulturist, I'm not a purist. I don't say you've got to plant native everything all the time. I think there's some really great species out there that are aesthetically pleasing or smell really nice or whatever, or my grandma had one in her yard or whatever the case is, but make sure that your site conditions are going to, be habitable for that tree. So right plant for the right site is first and foremost. You're going to find out the site conditions, what your soil's like, does it drain well, the sun exposure, the soil fertility, just general things. And then it depends on what product you're going to buy. Are you going to get
a container tree, or are you going to get a bald and burlap tree? Once you've picked these species, you want to pick the right time of year to plant those things too. Container stock can be planted year round if it's maintained and watered properly. Where if you chose a B&B, B&B is bald and burlap for those who may not know, then you want to do that in the spring or fall, before or after leaf drop, before bud break or after leaf drop, I should say. So then now you've got your site conditions, you've got your species chosen. Now, before you dig any holes, you probably want to call Julie to avoid utility lines when you're digging that hole. Make sure you're safe. If it is a bald and burlap tree, please get help. Those are really hard and heavy to move around by yourself. Take it from me. Don't hurt yourself doing it, so get some help. When you plant a tree, you want to make it the hole 2 to 3 times wider than the root ball, but no deeper. I think planting, from my experience anyway, planting trees too deeply is very, very common. And one of the, I won't say quickest ways to kill anything, because again, it's probably going to be a slow death for that tree, but it will eventually kill it or be a major cause of stress for it. So then once you get the hole dug, you backfill halfway and do what I like to call the chomp and stomp. So you take your shovel and kind of chop up the soil and stomp it down with your foot. So you're packing it in there. You use water to fill it up halfway, then backfill the rest of the way, rinse and repeat. And it's really important to pack the soil in well around those roots, because too much air to the roots is one of the first things that's going to stress out that tree. You want to water well after you plant, and depending again on what product you bought, you might have to water for 1 to 3 years. Whether it was bare root or container stock or bald and burlap. Staking, guy wires and staking is not always necessary. So I encourage you to reach out to your local extension office and find out if that's something that you need to do, for further guidance on specific products.
So then to follow up on that, we've got a homeowner question. And they said they keep hearing about root washing. What is it, and is it worth the extra effort when it comes to planting a tree?
Well, so root washing is a practice that essentially you're removing all the soil from the roots of that tree. It can be done with, I generally see it done with container stock, because you can do it with, again, bald and burlap, you can do it, but you're going to have a really big trough and somebody to help you lift it in there. But this is done so you can have a really good look at the roots. You want to be able to inspect them, make sure there's no broken roots or girdling roots or dead roots. You want to prune those things out of there. Again, I see it more with container stock, because when, for instance, a comparison, when trees are grown in a tree nursery and then they're dug with a tree spade, they have, well, essentially about 95% of their roots are removed. And so it's going to be stressed out anyways. You want to make sure you take care of it. So soaking might be a part of that practice. But B&B in the tree nursery, their roots are allowed to spread into the soil as far as they want. With container stock, your tree is only growing in that one pot. So you see those girdling roots circling around the pot pretty often. And that's one of the main reasons for root washing. So no, it's not required. Certainly if you were planting 150 trees somewhere to reforest, that might be more of an undertaking than you're willing to do. But if you've got one really nice, tree that you're looking to put in your yard, perhaps it is worth it to you.
Sarah, how do you know if you have planted a tree too deep? What does that do?
So when you plant a tree too deeply, the root flare will not be exposed. And essentially when it's planted too deeply, it will experience all kinds of stress, anything from root rot to, loss of foliage, all kinds of different bad things that could happen. Not a best practice.
Yeah, I see that quite a bit. A lot of times trees come already planted too deep in those containers, and And then the homeowner plants them even deeper. They dig a 20-foot hole for a 10-foot tree. So
That's
be
right. We
careful.
want to be, that's exactly right. We want to be able to see the root flare of that tree once it's in the ground. If it looks like a telephone pole, it's probably too deep.
Yeah, we don't plant telephone poles. That's a job for the power company. So our next question, or kind of series of questions that we get, is about emerald ash borer. I know there's people who might be listening, watching, that have been dealing with this for years and are like, oh, this is no big news to me. But there are communities like here in Macomb, where I'm at. Did people know about it? A lot did. Some people are just now finding out about it now that their ash is half dead. So where does Illinois stand with EAB? Like, how widespread is it now? Is it everywhere? What should we be, where should we be expecting to see this insect pop up?
Well, I would have to check more into that, or I'm certainly open to suggestion. As some people may know, emerald ash borer is a species of beetle. I hope that's right, Ken. It is a beetle.
Yes.
That it's pretty much decimated ash populations in several states, lots of places, including Illinois. And essentially the beetles feed under the bark and will weaken and eventually kill the tree. I had mentioned to you earlier, some tree nurseries were really devastated in this state when they all of a sudden could not move ash tree, the ash trees that they were used to making money on, to they couldn't move them outside of Illinois. So there has been some regeneration efforts, but the ash trees are not surviving to the age, where they're reproducing. So reproduction isn't occurring, regeneration isn't going well. Does that necessarily mean extinction? Perhaps not entirely. We saw Dutch elm disease that came through and wiped out almost all of the American elms, but there are still a few specimen trees here and there. But it will likely, I don't think the ash trees are going to recoup their traditional, economic purpose. We aren't going to be able to sell them probably until this species goes away. They aren't going to have the ecological effects that they once did. So I think the emerald ash borer is just another example, another shining example of an invasive species that we want to keep an eye on, we want to be aware of, and we want to kind of follow those guidelines that places like organizations like Extension are putting out, like don't move firewood, for instance.
So with young trees, we see there's a lot of things that can go wrong. We do have a question from Cook County on a tree that a person thinks there's a fungus making the bark peel off. It is planted next to a playground, so there is the potential that some kids peeled off the bark. So that could be a little misleading.
Yeah. So as we talked about, sometimes we're the pests, right? Sometimes just the human interaction, or maybe if those kids weren't peeling off the bark, they would be breaking the branches or stripping the leaves off or compacting the soil around there, which is something that happens a lot, but isn't always visible. We encourage anybody that's concerned about the health of their tree to really get up close and scout. If they think it's a fungus, look around for that fungus. Is there, fungal fruiting bodies on there? When somebody calls in with a tree question, I have a whole list of go-to questions or pictures that I ask them for. Look up close for, again, that fungal growth. Look for maybe some holes from boring insects. Look for oozing of sap or weeping of sap. Look for spots or bumps or cankers or whatever the case may be. Anything. I have to clarify typically that we're looking for insect infestations, not necessarily just one ant crawling on the tree, but whatever looks unusual to that client, right? Again, that picture, the list of pictures that I ask for, I'll ask for a picture of the entire tree from afar, which usually people think about. They want to show you the whole tree, but then also have a look around the base of the tree, the trunk where it goes in the ground. If you're seeing some fungus around there, that's probably not a good indication. That means there's decay in there at the base of a tree. Look where the smaller branches attach to the larger ones, where the larger branches attach to the trunk. I'll ask for a good picture of the bud and the leaf, both sides, and then ask for kind of a timeline, or, for your homeowners, for your clients, what has gone on around this tree? Has there been years of drought stress going on, or is it in a swampy area and it's a cherry tree? Hint, cherry trees do not like wet feet. But anything we can try to do to get a clear picture of a more holistic picture, I guess you could say, of the whole issue. This helps us to diagnose and recommend treatment.
Whenever I hear of a tree in decline near a playground, I'm always like, part of my brain. Yeah, it's just like those kids. Because when we have a little wooded area behind our house, and my boys know that when a new kid comes over, it's like never fails. They grab a stick or they grab a baseball bat or something. They start whacking away at the trees in the wooded area. And my kids are like, don't you do that. My dad's going to yell at you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They know that. It's just like,
Oh,
but
yeah.
It never fails. Never fails.
I've heard my own children yell at other kids for picking flowers in the park. I'm like, go get them, kids. Go get them.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Not your flowers. Those belong to the bees.
Yeah, it's like I keep thinking, sometimes we're the pests, and kids are just trying to find out about the world around them. You can't blame them for being like, well, I wonder what this does. I wonder what this feels like. I wonder what happens when I poke this. So I can appreciate their curiosity. You could have grown a tree if it weren't for those meddling kids. I know.
Oh,
So let's switch directions here to mulch. So a lot of times people will mulch around their trees, and oftentimes when you drive around, the mulch looks kind of like a volcano. And even commercial landscapers, you can see them doing this when they mulch trees, just kind of piling it up on the trunk of the plant. And we as Extension say don't do that. So what is the correct way to go about mulching your trees?
That's right. Don't do that. Don't make mulch volcanoes. I think the bagel, not muffin, is a good visual representation that sums it up pretty appropriately. So mulch volcanoes, for those who may not have heard of it or may not have seen it, they might notice it now. It's an improper technique to mulching, and where the mulch is kind of piled up against the bark, like you mentioned. And pretty much this just invites problems, This invites pests and pathogens to come in because it's nice and dark and moist, just like how pests and pathogens like it. So we recommend planting, again, with the root flare visible. And then we want to mulch 2 to 4 inches around the tree. If it's a young tree, try and do it out to the drip line of that tree, or where the crown, lines make a vertical line from the crown of that tree down to the ground, and mulch that big. Mulch has numerous benefits to trees. You're adding organic matter back to the soil. You're going to suppress the weeds around there, so there's no need to mow up against the trunk, which is going to cause mechanical damage. It reduces your water usage a little bit. So there's all kinds of things that are great about mulch, but less is more. We don't want to pile it up. And I would like to add also that mulch, even though a really good practice to use it, is not a substitute for proper plant health care. We got to do all the other things right too.
Yeah, you can't just mulch the heck out of that cherry planted in the swamp. It's still
Right.
probably gonna die because it's planted in the wrong place. So another question that's pretty common again are I call them tree rats, also known as squirrels, roosting or nesting inside hollow cavities of trees. And so, there was a specific question that came in recently through Ask Extension, which is it's another method for getting in touch with, your local extension educator. So this was a question that came in. So they're asking about, there's a hollow area in their Norway maple, but it's right where the two, I'm guessing, codominant trunks, two trunks split off. And there's a little hole in a hollow there where a squirrel is building their nest inside that tree trunk. So they want to know, first off, is this squirrel going to kill their tree? Do they need to get rid of it? And then they read that, what to do is to fill that void with concrete. So should they be doing that?
If I had pearls, I would clutch them. Heavens no, do not put concrete in your tree. It does not belong there. No, don't do that. You're exactly right. It sounds like that specific instance might be codominant stems growing together. And so we get this, when two trees grow together, they get what's called included bark in the middle where they're starting to grow together, which is going to cause for a weak spot in the tree. So if this client has already seen a hole in there, probably the squirrels did not make that. They're just making the best use of the habitat available to them. What can cause the hole right there is as this included bark continues to grow together, it may cause some decay and then when it catches water or, any kind of moisture stays in there, or perhaps other, pathogens, fungal or bacterial could be present without knowing more about it. But the likelihood is that it's probably included bark and has caused a weak spot in the tree. And the squirrels are just taking advantage of it. Don't put concrete in it. In fact, I wouldn't even suggest you go digging around in there, because if it is a weak spot, you have two trees, essentially what are two trees leaning either way, you could, that could pose a hazard to somebody's person or property. You can also, if you reach out to Extension, there are some of us certified arborists on staff. You could also reach out to another tree care professional in your area for more guidance on that.
Sarah, if you don't have a local arborist, we also have a listing of some local foresters. Would they be able to help like a person with their trees as well, like their landscape trees, or are they more focused on just going out in the forest and looking at trees?
I think it kind of depends. I don't want to misspeak for what somebody else's job may or may not be. Generally speaking, I think that district foresters focus on kind of larger scale projects, but that may not be true for every area in Illinois. Sometimes our municipalities have a certified arborist on staff too that isn't necessarily a tree care professional, but just the city person who takes care of boulevard trees. And even if they aren't certified, I do try to stress the importance of finding a certified arborist because we can search those lists and databases. But there are lots of good qualified people out there that don't necessarily have that one certification too.
So we've talked a lot about improper pruning and maintenance. So things like not cutting tree branches back to collars or trenching along tree roots and hitting those. If we have issues like this with our trees, how long can we expect them to live?
I often wish I had a crystal ball because I get asked questions like that a lot. And unfortunately, I can't tell anybody how long something's going to survive because there's so many variables in there, right? It's species, the age, the location, the environmental conditions that tree has endured. And honestly, for me to go out, and I am a certified arborist, so you'd think, okay, this gal knows what she's doing. Not always. I mean, sometimes I can go out and estimate a tree failure to occur, that's going to occur soon, and that tree lasts for 15 years. Or sometimes I think, oh yeah, that's not too shabby. And then it falls over in the next windstorm. And so it's tough for us to know the entire history of a tree, which can give you some insight. And it's tough to see inside of trees, at least with the naked eye. There are some tree decay detection devices that some arborists might use. And these work to varying degrees of effectiveness using ultrasound or what's it called? Electronic resonance, I think, something along those lines, or just the old standby increment borer where you twist pull a core sample out of there. But again, that's opening up more wounds to a tree that might already be stressed. So the best answer that I can say is I can't tell you how long that improper practices will take to kill a tree, but I can say that proper practices will probably improve that estimation.
I mean, it's like the tree lottery, they kind of get lucky. You see trees growing in the most impractical places, but they got lucky. They found a broken sewer pipe. They
Right.
found a source of energy, or it's just someone's left it alone, and it's done okay. But then there's other trees where you might try to baby it, and you pay too much attention, and then, yeah, like you said, it falls over in the next windstorm. It's I call it the tree lottery. You don't quite know
Yeah.
what's going to happen next.
Yeah. And, that kind of thing, trial and error happens to, I use this term loosely, trained professionals. But sometimes, yeah, you just don't know what might be going on inside of that tree. And we are just at the whim of nature.
It's a practice. It's like medicine. It's the practice of medicine. We're practicing on plants, so the stakes aren't as high, unless you really love that tree a lot. So, yeah. Well, that was a lot of great information about trees, tree care. Sarah, horticulture educator in Decatur. Thank you so much for being on the Good Growing Podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are produced by Wendy Ferguson and edited by me, Chris Enroth. A special thanks to Ken and Katie for being with us every single week to go through the topics of our choosings. This so happens to be talking about trees this week. So Ken, Katie, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. And Chris and Ken, it's always a pleasure to see you guys.
Thank you, Sarah and Chris, Katie. Let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. We are going to be chatting with our departing colleague, Martha Smith. She's taking off. She's retiring. We'll see her again. She lives in my unit. She's like a couple miles away from me, so I bet I'll see her again. She'll probably be a master gardener, so if we can twist her arm that way.
You should be so lucky.
I know. It's like the most qualified master gardener in the state of Illinois. So, well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening, or if you're watching this on YouTube, watching, and as always, keep on growing.